Okay. All right, call the roll, Katie.
Dr. Magoulias?
Here.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Here.
Mr. File?
Here.
Mr. Yatoni?
Here.
Mr. Goebel?
Here.
Mrs. Johnson?
Here. All right.
Hi there. I just had someone that joined with the last two digits of 60. Would you mind identifying yourself, please, so that I can mark you down as a visitor? Is that Dr. Graff? That's okay.
Okay. All right. Are there any visitors that wish to be addressed?
Andrea Graff's number ends in 60, so it very well could be her.
Excellent.
I have a letter to be read to the board, and it is from Sarah Luttrell. So I will read this now, and then if there are any visitors who wish to be addressed, they can unmute afterwards. It says, Dr. Magoulias and Rochester School District 3A board members, the REA would like to praise Mr. Cox's organization and planning of the return to learn possibilities for the 2021 school year. Mr. Cox addressed this early last April and initiated our local discussions soon after. All stakeholders were included in the devising of a systematic approach to remote, hybrid, and/or in-person learning. His leadership allowed us the much needed time to navigate almost every hypothetical situation our district might face. The final remote learning plan that was released last Friday, August 14th, 2020, involved the collaboration of many individuals who were all focused on the health, safety, and wellness of our students first, something that Mr. Cox has stressed since day one. He utilized thought exchange surveys to gather input from our community and met with students and staff regularly via Google Meet to communicate and show that we are here to take care of each other so that we can take care of students. We also want to acknowledge that Mr. Cox's strategic planning prior to the start of this school year allowed the remote learning decision to be done in a timely manner. We would like to thank our school board for its preparedness and awareness of teachers' needs during this time. We appreciate that you were able to make hard decisions for our district that may not have been popular at the time, but are appreciated now. It has allowed our community time to settle down emotionally, for parents to plan, and for teachers to learn a new way of teaching so we can reach every student. We are realizing that our district is benefiting from the positive and effective communication between our administration and our teachers. While our teachers may still be stressed because they do not want to fail our students and our community, there is time for them to plan. Also, as we see other school districts in Illinois who are experiencing teacher strikes, resistance, and discord, we are focused on helping our teachers currently serve our students. Kind regards, Sarah Luttrell and Megan Kuchar. Yeah, that was nice. Nice to get that. Okay, are there any other comments from visitors? Okay. I'll move on to approval of the consent agenda, and I'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second. Let Todd have it.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, we're approving the approval of minutes, approved disposal of verbatim closed session minutes of the August 20th, 2018 meeting, approved posting of salary and compensation report, and authorize superintendent to hire a certified occupational therapist assistant between August 17th and September 21st.
So move.
Okay, all those in favor, I guess we can't do all those in favor. It's what I do at my university.
Roll call.
Roll call.
I'll call the roll. Sure. Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, financial reports and investment reports.
Okay, on the investment report, you can see balances dropped a little over $1.1 million. 523, a little over 523,000 of that total were due to bond payments, and the rest to normal operating expenses. You can see interest rates continue to stay low and obviously still decline. And I'll talk a little bit about that here and a little bit about how that's going to affect the interest income for FY21's budget. But in a nutshell, for the investment report, those are our balances, as well as the rates being on the decline still.
We had a question from Bill earlier, looking for the sales tax receipts in the financial report.
Yeah, and I can go to that next. I was just
Okay.
going to touch on a few things in with the sales tax information. I will report that quarterly going forward in writing. I mean, I can report it now, obviously verbally, but anyway, in regards to that, last year's sales tax total for the fiscal year was October through June. That total was roughly 1.17 million. This July was our lowest month in terms of what we received, a little over $103,000. August picked back up to 119,000. And what I currently project for FY21's budget is conservatively receiving about $1.3 million in a 12-month time span in FY21. And just a few other things to touch on in the treasurer's report. Again, I had talked about interest income for FY20. We budgeted a little less than this, but we received a little over $225,000 in interest income. Going forward in FY21, I've cut that in half. So we'll be, I think, lucky if rates continue the way they are to receive a little over $112,000 in FY21. A few other things that have affected our fund balances. Obviously, some of the COVID-19 related expenses. Keep in mind the first just under $141,000 of what we will spend on COVID-related expenses are covered by the CARES grant. We have yet to receive that money, but just know that first $141,000 will be covered by that revenue stream. I continue to work on the budget for FY21, adjusting those numbers. Unfortunately, the deficit continues to grow. A couple things that are of concern to me currently are the residential costs going forward. This year, we currently budget a little over $410,000. That's approximately 10% more than what we paid last year. I'm also going to look at reducing rental income by $25,000, food service and athletic admission fees. I'll reduce those by 10%, which equates to about $82,000 in reduction. So with the state funding being flat for FY21, as well as our real estate tax revenue being about $65,000 less than last year, it'll obviously be a challenging year for that. Those items plus a few more are going to be discussed at the Finance Committee meeting in September prior to the regular board meeting.
Bob, do you think there'll be any more federal money coming? Have you heard anything more about more federal money?
Mr. Cox may be able to better answer that question.
We're hearing that there is going to be an additional round of CARES dollars that will come. There may be more stipulations tied to those CARES dollars, but it's up in the air as to what those stipulations would be. More things. What I'm hearing is more things that would help us or require us to operate in person. But thus far, we haven't received that first round yet. So we've certainly spent it, but it's going to be an expensive year, no doubt. And Mr. McDermott's probably being optimistic in reducing the athletic revenues and some of those by just 10%. It's probably going to be much greater than that of a reduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Parking for students, what do we ever do about, do we charge for parking spaces? And
We do, yeah, we do charge for those spaces, but obviously some have not paid for those, obviously due to the start of school being remote. So those individuals that already have paid that particular fee for this semester, we're either going to credit their account if we don't, aren't able to come back sooner than what's expected. That'll be prorated based upon when that may happen.
because the question came to me about that, Bob.
Right.
Anything else? Okay, I need a motion to approve the bills, payroll, and treasurer's report.
So moved.
Thank you, Bill.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Reynolds. Okay, any questions on the bills? Okay, call the roll.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni.
Yes.
All right, the year-to-date fund summary.
Christy, that basically was in my report as to, just starting out the year. Other than the COVID-19 related expenses, we're still operating currently, in a normal basis other than those expenses.
Okay. All right, I think we've done all the questions on that too then. Okay, administrator reports. And the director reports are included in your packet. Mr. Cox, do you want to go over a superintendent report?
Mr. Cox, you're muted.
Start over.
Thanks. First and foremost, I would like to recognize and thank the REA for the letter. That was very nice, but it's easy to make decisions when you have good people, and we have teachers who have been working hard and administrators who I've mentioned before who've been working tirelessly, and they've made plan after plan only to have to redo it again to get us to this point, and are still continuing to work through logistics. The morale of teachers was high. It still is. That was a bad way to say that it was high. It still is. But part of that was, I think, due to the board's ability to make the decision and help us go remote to the start of the school year, so we're able to focus on one thing. I have shared with individuals, it's not ideal. It's certainly not where we want to be, but it is allowing us to focus on one thing and systematically work our way back into school. So getting everybody back this week was a good celebration. Having our teachers on campus was a real positive, and it continues to be a positive, and we're looking forward to moving forward, starting with remote instruction and getting our students back onto campus as quickly and as safely as we can. In regards to the return to learning, just a couple of things I want to focus on our remote learning plan. One thing, you all have had the remote learning plan that was sent from the district to our families and to our staff on Friday, which had the individual building logistic plans attached to that. One of the things that we've stressed with our families is that, unlike the spring, remote learning won't be all or nothing. Last spring, we shut things down and really there was no access to our campus at all. Today, we have teachers on campus. Students are going to have access to our campus, and albeit it will still be tightly regulated, we will have an active campus in terms of students coming on and off campus. Currently, we do have some activities that are happening. What we plan to phase into early is allowing students to have access, and it will be scheduled access for short periods of time, to our libraries to get internet access. We can see individual or small groups of students who would be scheduled to come onto campus for intervention, for instruction enhancement. There could be OT, PT, labs. Those are the type of things we're looking at and working on the logistics of gradually bringing students onto campus, hopefully working our way up to that 50% capacity. We will reevaluate plans and with healthcare professionals at the midterm. If we're able to move faster than that, we certainly will, but realistically, the midterm is probably the quickest we'll evaluate, with the goal of getting to our hybrid, our full hybrid model by the end of the first quarter. Again, that's probably the most optimistic outlook at this point. We need a few things to go our way, but that's where we are with the remote learning piece. Our next steps are to work on more logistics. We've got to get the remote learning kicked off, but as soon as we get that kicked off, we're going to be working on more detailed logistics of the hybrid plans. The good news is with that, we're much further ahead there because that's the system we are working at first. We are looking at 4 days a week, with the 1 day, all in-person instruction with limited remote, and then we move to the hybrid model. So the principals have spent a good majority of the summer working on these hybrid logistics. So we're going to be able to turn those around fairly quickly, but we also don't want to confuse parents. So we want to wait a few weeks before we get that out there, and also work through the actual logistics and see what works and what doesn't now that we have people on campus, because you can plan all you want, but until you get people on campus and actually start putting the plans in action, it looks much differently. So those are a few things that are happening right now with remote learning, and I'll pause here to see if there's any questions surrounding that.
And it rolls into old business also, the presentation and discussion of the remote learning plans.
Yes. Yeah, I really covered what I was going to say in old business there. So unless there's additional questions, with the updated guidance on IHSA and IESA, we had our first athletic contest. That probably is another cause for celebration, but we had our first athletic contest over the weekend of junior high baseball. It was good to see kids just out there competing. There were smiles on their faces, and I think they were happy to represent their school and their community. I went down there and things went pretty well. Mrs. Palace did a nice job of setting things up. People were spaced out. We had our dugouts, limited use. We shut down the bleachers so students could use those, so our student athletes could use the bleachers as well, so they weren't all huddled up together in the dugout. Coaches wearing their masks, students wearing their masks whenever they weren't playing. And we asked our families, one thing that changed on us last week is now our families are required to wear masks outdoors as well while they're at events. When we went down there, people were spaced out very, very far from each other. Individuals, when they were sitting by themselves, it was hot. It was 90 some odd degrees. They took their masks off, but I noticed when people got up and walked around, they were putting their masks on. Mrs. Palace had her mask on. I had mine on. We had a few employees that had children there that put theirs on when they got up and walked around, which helped. But overall, it went pretty well. You can see the changes and the updates in the IHSA and IESA updated guidance that we received last week. But one specific that I wanted to touch on this evening, because we have to move on this tomorrow, is in regards to transportation. Transportation is now limited to 6 feet for athletic contests, which means we can fit roughly, I haven't followed up with Brenda on this, but somewhere between probably 10 and 16 kids per bus is all we're going to be able to fit on a bus for athletic transportation. It's extremely, extremely restrictive. Either way, whether we end up being able to take 50 or 49 kids per bus, or whether we're limited to the 6 feet and have roughly 15 students per bus, we're planning on issuing a waiver that will allow families to transport their own children, or for children or students to drive themselves. I've worked with council on this waiver, have done these things similarly in the past, but we have had families reach out to us and they're not comfortable with their children riding the bus. So they would like to take them themselves or allow their students to ride themselves. Plus, for us, from a transportation and safety standpoint, especially right now with the restriction of the 6 feet, we would be taking roughly 3 buses to many of our athletic contests to bus all of our children. So I just wanted to see if there was any reservation or questions surrounding issuing a waiver or allowing parents or students to have a waiver to drive themselves to contests.
It's a finite.
My only concern would have been, what council would have said. And since you're working with council, I have no concern.
And I've done these waivers before. We had to change this a little bit this time because of junior high students, but we've done these before in co-op athletic situations where students drive themselves to another school for practice and things of that nature. So I've had a little experience with them, and they went okay. Communication. I met with 2 focus groups last night, a parent focus group and a student focus group. And with the parent focus group, both went really well. With the parent focus group, I'm going to follow up with some written communication on this as well to the people who participated and also who were unable to participate, but without going into too great a detail, because we talked for about an hour and 10 minutes. Big things that came up from our families was communication. We talked around several topics around communication, especially with when we would post lessons and when lessons would be due. That seemed to be a big topic of interest, obviously, it is to teachers, but also to parents and students. The direct live instruction and what that would look like and how parents would access it or how students would access it and what would happen when they were not able to access the direct live instruction. A priority was continuing to provide help for our kindergarten parents. We had a kindergarten parent on there who said that was really important to work on. And then supplies still continues to be a question. People really want to know about supplies and have questions surrounding those. So we came out of there with some good actionable steps and good feedback we can take. And I plan on following up with those individuals with that, just a summary of the meeting and some actionable steps that we were able to take place. But it was good discussion surrounding that. Finance committee, Mr. McDermott had mentioned that we would have a finance committee in September. I would propose that we would have the finance committee on Wednesday, September 16th at 7:30 a.m. And I believe that's Mr. Yatoni and Mr. Goebel.
Fine with me.
Would you prefer remote or come in person?
I prefer in person.
Todd, unmute, please. There
I
you
was just
go.
looking at my calendar. So
Oh.
September 16th at
7:30.
7:30 works for me, and I don't care if we're in person or remote.
We'll just do it 7:30 in the boardroom in person. And then a couple additional items that I did not include in the report that I wanted to share with the board. These numbers are new of today, and I'll plan on doing a monthly report like this with some of our COVID-related numbers. Today, we have 5 staff members quarantined. Of those staff members, 1 is either symptomatic or positive to date. And through the first 3 days of work, from Thursday through today, we have had a total of 9 staff members quarantined. The total number of days of lost work or people not able to be here in person is 14 out of those individuals. And then student enrollment. Our student enrollment as of today is 2,121 students. That is down 133 students from last year at this same time. And we have currently 252 students who are not registered.
You have any kindergarten numbers?
109 kindergartners. We have had several kindergartners leave, but we've had several come in new as well. The other report that we're getting, and if I'm wrong on that, Katie, please chime in, but I believe it was 109 kindergartners. The other feedback that we're getting, though this is there's nothing scientific about this, it's anecdotal, but some of the conversations we've had with families who's called the district office, talking about other options or going other places, or that I've talked to personally, I think we'll get some of these families back as we move forward into the second semester or even next year. But right now, families are faced with some very difficult choices, as are we, and some are going and taking advantage of other options. And I think we will see some of these families come back. Some are leaving for completely unrelated reasons. They're moving or things of that nature. And that's all I have for my report, unless there's any additional questions.
How did parents react to the graduation idea of letting the people, seniors, get through the school in one semester and go ahead and graduate? Did you have anybody react to that?
Not negatively, no.
That'd be
I
positive.
think we have some of the interest. Mr. Ashbaugh and the counselors have been communicating with our senior families. They have them, they have them kind of in 3 different categories, where there's some they can do it right now. There's some need to take some additional steps to be able to do it, and some they're not eligible at all. But we're still getting feedback. Is there anything, Mr. Ashbaugh, you want to add to that on early graduation?
No, I mean, currently, I think we have about 24 to 26 students that have expressed interest in graduating early. And like Mr. Cox said, we're just having to work through the logistics if they need an extra class or what they actually need. So I will tell you that I think with sports still on the table for the spring, that's why you're seeing a lot of students not show interest currently.
I didn't think that.
Any other questions? I want to say that I took some time this weekend to read through each one of the building's remote plans, and I sent out a huge thank you with a lot of gratitude and kudos to the administrators who worked on their building plans and our special education plans. So thank you to all of you. I know that was a lot of extra hours. You don't get paid overtime necessarily. It's a work of heart. So thank you for all the work you did. Okay. All right, new business. We have consideration and approval of an easement with the Village of Rochester for a water main to be installed along Maxheimer Road. And Mr. Cox or Mr. McDermott, do you want to discuss this before we get a motion?
Yeah, I would defer to Mr. McDermott. Whenever this came across the plate, it seemed fairly routine, but there's some technical details to work out. So I recruited Bob to assist with this, especially with him having some historical knowledge. So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, with that easement, the village came to us not too far out, and we're talking about putting in a new water main there on Maxheimer Road. So they prepared an original easement and resolution, and basically in the end we sent that to our attorneys, and they have advised us to make a few changes, which basically are just protecting us for any future really roadways or driveways across that easement. He was worried about needing approval to do that in the future, so he adjusted the easement for that, as well as if there are any I guess property that we currently own that is either damaged or has to be moved, that those expenses are the village expenses and not ours. And then also to protect the crops that are currently in the field. And that really were the only changes that needed to be made.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. McDermott, I remember when we built the school, we paid the village like $200,000. Was that regarding a water line or sewer lines?
That was both to go out to the site.
Okay,
So to basically go from the firehouse across the road to the intermediate school.
but these new water lines won't be using our water lines, right?
Well, basically they'll come into our water, line that's out there. They're increasing the size of the water line by the school.
Mm-hmm.
So the village president had told me that will, help our pressure out there, because we won't be at the end of the line anymore. It'll go past us, obviously go all the way down Maxheimer Road. So the water main, I believe, might be going from, it's either a 6 to an 8 or an 8 to a 10. I can't remember offhand.
Okay, but they're not using part of the water main that we paid for. Right, really getting.
Well, they're hooking into it, yes.
Oh, man, we need some of our money back.
Why not? Yeah.
I'll talk to you about that later.
Okay, all right. I remember that was a big fee, $200,000 we paid them. All right.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we need a motion to approve the easement with the Village of Rochester for a water main to be installed along Maxheimer Road.
So moved.
Thank you, Todd.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Call the roll.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel.
Yes.
Okay, are there any items for miscellaneous?
I don't know if I should go first or not, but I wrote down some notes from last Friday. At the resolutions meeting, 2 of the resolutions were withdrawn because the verbiage was unclear and the proposer didn't, she wanted to consult with the lawyer and she'll resubmit them next year. And another 2 were duplicates and were combined into 1. So there's always a slate of all the ones that what the committee recommended, and this is what is voted on in November. And the slate recommends that the following are adopted, that we wanted to amend and strengthen our belief statement on equity. They want to ask the state to expand the issuance of provisional licenses. Right now, only certain subject areas can get provisional licenses. There were 3 proposals regarding charter schools. They come up almost every year, and so it's really just reaffirmations of existing belief statements. Then there was a proposal to allow schools to use remote learning days when a building is being used for election day or other government use. And yes, we know that like November, we're not allowed to have school, but there's also often primary usage days that some schools have to deal with. So this was to allow them the option of using a remote day rather than having to be there when the school building's being used. The Illinois, and then this final one is the Illinois Association of School Boards shall encourage members of the U.S. Congress, the Illinois General Assembly, related administrative agencies, and state and federal courts to take a regional approach in response to national health emergencies. That, of course, was in response to COVID and how the entire state was shut down at one point when there were some counties that had no cases. So it's to ask the state to think of a more regional approach like they're doing now. Then we recommended a not adopt. This one was controversial. Somebody proposed that we ask the state to strengthen the law on gun storage. Right now, if there's minors 14 and under in the home, it has to be locked, whether it's loaded or not. And this school board wanted us to ask the state to strengthen that to 18. And we recommended do not adopt because the vast majority of us felt like this wasn't an area that school boards should get into. It was out of our jurisdiction, you know. So then the other one that was recommended to not adopt, even though we agreed with the concept, there was a proposal to have the state disclose school report cards by June 1st so they could be used in planning the next school year. However, June 1st, we decided was so early that a lot of schools wouldn't even have their data submitted to ISB yet. So it's kind of hard to ask ISB to release something if they don't have all the data yet. And then we also recommended a do not adopt on requesting the state to offer low-cost loans to school districts for infrastructure objects. And then the other controversial, there were only 2 controversial ones this year. The other controversial one was really all about semantics. There's a proposal to require K through 1 teachers that were going to teach reading to have to pass a specific Foundations of Reading exam and literacy education course. And an overwhelming majority of us felt that was too much like a mandate and too specific than what school boards should get into as far as dictating curriculum and licensing procedures. And so even though the original proposer wanted us to vote on it, we voted do not adopt. Actually, we voted adopt, but it failed. It failed. We failed to recommend it. And then instead, I proposed an option to use what IASB had used as verbiage instead of the proposer. And so we recommended do adopt on this verbiage, support initiatives and teacher preparation programming that prepare teachers to be trained in scientifically proven methods of reading instruction that promote student literacy. So that all will be coming up for vote. More details will be coming out. I think they were leaning towards doing an email vote instead of something like a Zoom call or Google Meet because we had so many technical problems with just the 22 of us that were there. And if we open it up to some kind of a Zoom call for every school board in the state, just letting people speak on it was going to be overwhelming, and the technical difficulties. So I think we're going to nix that and probably do something by email. IASB was looking into maybe even just having us vote on the slate, the unanimous ones, and pulling the 2 controversial ones out until next year. So sorry that was windier than I meant to be, but I'd prefer for you guys to be informed, and let you know what all's going on, have the benefit of having me be there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, collective negotiating matters, the selection of a person to fill a public office, including a vacancy in public office, litigation, and discussion of minutes lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Amy.
Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, call roll. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so action items. I need a motion to approve the personnel report.
So moved.
Thank you. I have my second also.
Yep.
Okay, call the roll.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the superintendent evaluation process.
So moved.
Second.
Is that Mr. File or Ms. Reynolds? Dr.
Give it
Magoulias?
to Mr. File. My name's in there enough.
Mhm.
I just like to keep things moving.
Okay, call the roll.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the 2021 principal evaluation process.
So moved.
So moved.
Awesome. Did you get the second, Katie?
Is it Todd and then Amy?
Yep.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
And we need a motion to approve the continued sealing of closed minutes.
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Thank
give it
you.
to Bill.
And call the roll, please.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni?
Yes.
I think that's all of it, right?
Before we adjourn, I have one point of clarification for item D on the authorization to advertise the Board of Education vacancy. What I'll have Katie do, if it's okay with the board, is just put a note in the minutes that the board elected to not advertise and to select from the previous pool of candidates. Does that work?
Mhm.
Sounds accurate.
We don't need a motion to do that.
No, you just took no action. I mean, it was action to authorize the advertisement, and if there's no action, you didn't do it, obviously.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second? Todd?
Are we in a hurry to go home?
Right. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.